Tonight.
So we were in the middle of a show run, and the following week we were supposed to go to Madagascar, and before we knew it, everything was canceled, and that wasn't happening anymore.
Closed theaters, empty streets, making art in a time of crisis when all the rules have changed.
All of a sudden props become partners, or furniture becomes partners, and how can your wall hold your weight? What can you do with your wall to manipulate your body?
The world premiere of Inside an Open Window by Washington, D.C. choreographer and Company E founding member Robert J. Priore. Plus, tools and tips for educators managing the online teaching world in the Teacher's Corner, and digital technology and technique. That's what's ahead tonight in On Cue. The performing arts. The title says it all. Artists coming together to create. Audiences meeting those artists in a shared social experience in theaters large and small. But what happens when all of that is suddenly impossible? Here in May, we're in the midst of the coronavirus epidemic of 2020. Sometime in the next few weeks, somewhere in the world, the 100,000th death is supposed to be reported from this plague. Theaters, schools are months away from reopening. But crisis is what the arts are built for. They tell stories about life, love, hope, aspiration, sorrow, anguish, and ultimately, a story of a path forward. They have an extraordinary inability to take no for an answer. To misquote Jeff Goldblum, art finds a way. This show is about that journey. Each week, we'll bring you tools and tips for creating and teaching in a changed world. We'll talk with artists, with diplomats, with people who are walking this journey right here, right now. And we'll bring you a world premiere from our Shelter series, Creating Art in a Time of the Coronavirus. Let's get started.
About how can I make something that is enjoyable, not just for the artist performing it, but the audience that'll then in turn see it when it's complete.
Robert J. Priore is a creator, a choreographer, a dancer living in Washington, D.C. He's a founding member of Company E, and he was the first person that we tapped to create a new work for Shelter. His product is a world premiere that we'll share with you tonight, Inside an Open Window. Let's meet Rob.
First of all, thanks for being the first person to jump into this particular project and being the first of our Shelter Project people.
Thank you for asking me. I'm happy to be here.
When we first started talking about this, the whole idea was this 9 windows idea or open windows idea. And you, as a choreographer who really understands canons and the way that you see cascades and different kinds of structure, it seemed immediately obvious to come to you and say, can you start this process off for us? How do you get there?
So we kind of worked 2 ways. One was like, okay, let's build. We experimented. Are we going to get the best results with full body? Are we going to get the best results seated in a chair and like knees up? Are we going to get the best results, just the bust? And I think that's where we landed in terms of like, we can really do some interesting things if we're trying to cut our frame. So it was 3 things. It was framing and vantage point, which came into play very much in sections 1 and 2 of where is the camera shooting from and how is the camera seeing you. And then 2, we made material. That was like, actually that's 1, right? We made the material. We played around with making movement that we enjoyed. up, da 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 da, and across arm, boom, ba da ga. And then in terms of how can we interpret the movement we're doing in canon and sequence to be more visually appealing and more visually exciting, took a lot of work, because what people don't always know on Zoom either is what I see is not what anybody else sees, because you're always in the same spot when you sign into a meeting. So it was some of the most rewarding parts were, you know, when you're working with dancers, it's so virtually, it's so hard to understand them, so much harder to understand how they're feeling, what they're doing, because you're behind two screens. So I'm watching and I'm like, oh, this looks so cool, because all of the canons and the rearrangements are happening exactly how I want them to on my screen. But if Tara's in the top corner and I'm in the middle and Gwen's in this corner, on Gwen's screen, she's in the middle, I'm down in this corner, and Tara's in the middle corner aside on the left side of your screen. So it's like no one was seeing it until I was like, all right, guys, I'm going to screen record this run, and we're going to log out, because you have to log out every time you screen record to get the video, and then log back in and watch it. And it was like all of a sudden these light bulbs started going off. And that's when it also became somewhat more of a collaborative process, because people were seeing the result. Mm-hmm. So it took a lot of patience, but I think we managed to make some exciting different ways to move from screen to screen and see where the screens are appearing and where they're coming from in different patterns within those 9 windows.
Let's look at this triptych of yours and look at all 9 of these particular windows.
Nice work. We'll be back with more of our conversation with Robert J. Priore and a look at the second part of his triptych, Inside an Open Window, a little bit later on in the program. In the meantime, if it seems like everything about teaching has changed in the last couple of months, it's not your imagination. Each week, we'll take a look in the teacher's studio with our colleague Philip, who will look at helpful tools, techniques, and approaches to managing the online digital teaching environment. And even if you're not a teacher, this week's subject of conversation, Zoom, and the helpful things that he's found inside of it, is probably worth a watch. Here's Inside the Teacher Studio.
Hi everyone, my name is Philip Reeden and this is the Teaching Corner. Whether you're new to digital teaching and just starting off your first classes or you've been seasoned in virtual education, we're going to have some tips and tricks to help you be the most successful in this virtual endeavor. This week we're going to go through how to set up a virtual classroom before you even invite your students. I use the Zoom platform mostly for my teaching, so we're going to use that as an example, and I'm going to take you through my settings to be the most successful specifically to dance. So come along, let's go through our settings. So here I am in my settings bar of Zoom. Here's a big one, join before host. Sometimes this one's on, but to ensure that people aren't causing trouble before your class even starts, click that off. Enable personal meeting ID is something that is very helpful. You can send your own personal meeting room to your students before class gets started. If you are scheduling classes week to week, you can use your personal meeting ID and schedule all of those in advance. Moving right along, we are here in the chat option. I do click these two options on for both private chat and regular chat. I use it with my students routinely. I'll tell you how I use it in a safe manner later. And screen sharing. Screen sharing is great when you have to share a video. Sometimes I send my kids videos of inspiration from YouTube, or I want them to research something. So we do some screen sharing sometimes. This is another one that I really love, the breakout room option. I turn that on. It helps when you need to separate students for a task. Here's an option, the waiting room option is great because you as the host can admit each person one by one for the safety of your participants. All my classes are private classes, so I have no need for the waiting room feature, but I do know with open classes that is a great feature to use. Okay, so I'm gonna take you guys on a virtual experience. You guys are gonna come into my virtual classroom. Let's go. Oh, look who we have here. It's Kelsey. She's gonna be one of my assistants today. She's gonna pretend that she is one of our dance students in this experience. So let's go through a couple of things that I really love in this Zoom frame as a teacher. So my biggest and most favorite one is this mute button right here. Clickety clack, mute all. So if they're being really loud, I can't hear them, I can talk over them. It is amazing. They can be wild. This is great, especially if there's background noise. Okay, here's another thing that I really, really love. Sometimes in TAP classes, or just classes in general, it's easier for my friends to listen to the music when I share my computer sound with them. I click share, I can go to my Spotify. Oh, what does she want to listen to? What a great song. I can hear it from over here, she can hear it from over there, nice and clear. And then at any point, we can stop that, right? That one is great, especially when you have like a follow-along class where you don't really want the music behind you, but you want them listening to the music. One other big tip is sometimes my students or participants get really chatty. So right now my chats are on everyone publicly and privately. So like physical typing, right? And they are typing, but you know what? Sometimes you don't want that. You don't want to hear that extra what they had for lunch. It's quite distracting. Oh, there's a type. Okay, so let's say Kelsey was typing too much. I love when I can click participant can chat with no one. That means she is blocked, she can't type, and she isn't distracted. So I love that feature. Oh, one of my favorite things that I love throwing is reactions. This is great. This is great. Claps. Look at that. Oh, there's a thumbs up from Kelsey. I love that. So before you even go into your dance studio, I highly recommend that you use these options, the claps and the thumbs up, but you also have other signals for your students. Things like from the top, and again, could you repeat? Those are great gestures that if your kids are muted, that they can go through when you ask a question like, Kelsey, we just did the last 8 counts. Do you want me to go on? Do you want to repeat? We can go from the top if you want to do that. Oh, repeat, love that. Great. So using hand signs in your classroom is great. There you have it. There are a couple of my settings tricks that I use. Join me next time as we keep building our virtual classroom. Bye now.
Let's go back to our conversation with Robert J. Priore and the world premiere of Inside an Open Window. This is part 2 of that triptych. We showed you part 3 first. We'll show you part 1 last, but part 2 is where it's supposed to be. And there's an interesting story behind how he came to make this particular part of the work. It carries the subtitle Shine, and if you watch the video closely, you might just find where that title comes from. Let's go back to that chat with Rob.
This is the section that has what I like to think of as the impossible Rob somersault backflip on the bed. How did the quartet come about?
So for the quartet, like I think it was after we worked on our group of 9, right? And in 9, I really wanted to see as much similarity as we could while still seeing 9 individual people, right? So I wanted, as much as I could, a similar white background. You're seeing 9 squares, 9 people trying to emulate similarity, but not being the same. So when we got to 4, I was like, how can I see the 4 most different spaces, the 4 most unique ways to move? And so, you know, I'm willing to throw myself anywhere. I've always been that way. So like I said, my bed frame is big, it's sturdy, and I knew I could flip around on it. And I had the other 3 dancers kind of walk around their house, and I said, like, you know, show me places where we can interpret, I want to say, your space without, you know, disrupting everyone else, because they're still our homes. And if you don't live alone, you have to be mindful and respectful of those people.
Well, it's a tech world these days, and there's nobody better to take us inside that tech world than our colleague Boris Willis. Each week, Boris will take a look at something interesting going on in the world of technology that all of us might find fun, interesting, useful, or just entertaining. Here's Boris.
Today in Technique, we're going to take a look at an app I like called House Party. Now, House Party is very similar to lots of the other messaging apps that you'll find, but with a couple of additions. So I grew up in a small town, and in a small town, you stop by friends, family, you say hello, you just drop in anytime. Well, House Party works very much the same way. You're online, you're in your own space, your own room, and people can join in. You and 7 other people can just have a conversation anytime. You just drop in as if you're just stopping by someone's house and maybe having a party. Now, House Party has one thing that I really like, and that is the ability to play games inside the app. So, right at the top of the app, you can just tap on the dice icon, and that will bring up a few different games. Now, you can't see them here all that well, but it brings up the games, and then you and everybody else in the room can actually play together. And I think that's a lot of fun. Now, if you don't want any more people than you have currently, you can always just lock the room, and then only those people will be able to chat with you. If you want to leave a video message for a friend, they have a feature called Face Mail. So you can just leave a video message for your friends by hitting the Face Mail and leaving a video message that way. Also very cool. Now you can get House Party on iOS, Android, Mac, and as a Chrome extension on Windows and Linux. This has been Boris Willis with Technique. I'll catch you next time.
Do you know anybody who's making interesting work these days? Are you making it yourself? Would you like to share it with us? We'd love to know what everybody's up to these days, and who knows, maybe we can get it on this particular program and give it a shout out and see a little bit more about what's happening out in the creative world right now. You can find us at www.companye.org, online on Instagram, Facebook, and all the other social media platforms. We'd love to know what you're up to, and maybe we can find a way to put ourselves together and give you a good shout out. We're going to close out tonight's program with the last of the 3 parts world premiere of Robert J. Priore's Inside an Open Window. This is the solo, which actually appears first in the sequence of his show, but third for our purposes. We held it for you for last because of the subject matter. Rob, in his conversation, which we'll share with you here, talks about the sense of isolation that the last couple months have brought and what it is that led to this creation with Kelsey.
I think by the time I started working with Kelsey, this fatigue of like, okay, I really can only go to the grocery store and to get gas and to, go for a walk. But we were feeling more alone. So I was like, okay, Kelsey, how do we use your space? How can we maximize the room that you're in every day? Because part of your home is you don't ever expect it and don't necessarily ever want it to be also your office. I think the process started as this hopeful moment and ended in that same vein, and that we're trying to recreate this connection to each other, no matter how alone or together we feel.
It's been great to be with you tonight in this first edition. We look forward to seeing you again in the future, and thanks very much for being with us. Good night.